Spanish is often introduced as the language of Spain and Latin America, but that simple description barely captures its scale. Today, Spanish has about 519 million native speakers and roughly 636 million speakers in total when second language users are included. That makes it the second most spoken native language in the world, after Mandarin Chinese, and one of the most important global languages in politics, education, media, and the Internet. It is also the most widely spoken Romance language, ahead of Portuguese, French, Italian, Romanian, and others. Its reach stretches from Europe to the Americas, from international organizations to online communities, and from everyday family life to diplomacy. To understand how Spanish became so influential, we need to go back to its roots, not in modern Spain as we know it, but in the shifting world of the Iberian Peninsula after Rome. Spanish belongs to the Indo-European language family, the enormous family that includes languages as different as English, Hindi, Persian, Greek, Russian, and Latin. More specifically, Spanish is a Romance language, meaning it descends from Latin. But it did not come from the polished classical Latin of Roman literature alone. It developed mainly from Vulgar Latin, the everyday spoken Latin used by soldiers, traders, settlers, workers, and local communities across the Roman Empire. When Rome controlled the Iberian Peninsula, Latin gradually spread among populations who had previously spoken many different local languages. Over generations, that spoken Latin changed. Pronunciations shifted, grammar simplified in some areas, local influences remained, and regional varieties appeared. Spanish is one result of that long transformation, Latin reshaped by centuries of daily speech in Iberia. The Iberian Peninsula did not produce just one Latin-based language. After the collapse of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century, political power fragmented, and so did speech communities. Different dialects of Vulgar Latin developed in different regions, eventually giving rise to several Ibero-Romance languages, including Spanish, Portuguese, Galician, Catalan, and others. Spanish emerged from this broader Ibero-Romance world. Its early development was shaped by geography, settlement patterns, political borders, and contact with neighboring varieties. The language we now call Spanish originated in the Kingdom of Castile, a historical kingdom in north-central Spain. This is why Spanish is also called Castilian, or Castellano. The two names carry history. Spanish emphasizes the modern national and global language, while Castilian points back to the region where one influential variety first gained power. The earliest written traces that resemble Spanish appear in Latin texts from mid-northern Iberia around the 9th century. These were not full books written in Spanish as a standardized language. Instead, they were signs that local speech was already drifting away from formal Latin. Scribes might write in Latin but include spellings, words, or notes that reveal how people actually spoke. This matters because languages usually exist in speech long before they become literary or administrative tools. For centuries, people were speaking early forms of Spanish while official writing remained heavily Latin-based. Written evidence lets historians see the transition. Latin was still prestigious, but a new vernacular language was taking shape underneath it. Spanish was not invented at a single moment. It slowly emerged from countless everyday conversations. A major turning point came in the 13th century, when Spanish began to be used more systematically in writing, especially in Toledo, an important city of the Kingdom of Castile. This was crucial because written use gives a language institutional weight. When a language is used for law, administration, scholarship, translation, and literature, it becomes more than a local way of speaking. It becomes a tool of power and organization. The rise of Castile helped Castilian Spanish spread beyond its original area. As Castile expanded politically, its language gained prestige and practical value. People did not adopt it only because of grammar or beauty, they adopted it because it was linked to courts, documents, education, military power, and social mobility. Language spread often follows power, and Spanish is a clear example. Spanish vocabulary still carries deep evidence of its Latin ancestry. Around 75% of modern Spanish vocabulary is Latin in origin, including words that Latin itself had borrowed from ancient Greek. This is why Spanish shares so many recognizable patterns with other Romance languages. Words related to family, law, religion, numbers, time, agriculture, and daily life often have Latin roots. The grammar also reflects its Romance heritage. Nouns have grammatical gender, verbs carry detailed endings for person and tense, and word forms often preserve relationships that go back to Latin structures. Yet Spanish is not simply Latin with a new accent. Sound changes transformed words, new vocabulary entered through history, and speakers reshaped grammar through use. The language is best understood as a living descendant, not a museum copy. The global story of Spanish changed dramatically in the early modern period with Spanish colonial expansion. As Spain established colonies overseas, the language crossed the Atlantic and became deeply rooted in the Americas. This was not a simple process of one language replacing all others overnight. The Americas were home to many indigenous languages, cultures, and empires. Spanish spread through administration, religion, migration, education, trade, and social hierarchy. In some places, it became dominant over time; in others, it existed alongside indigenous languages that remain important today. The result was not one perfectly uniform Spanish, but a global family of Spanish varieties. Pronunciation, vocabulary, and expressions differ across Mexico, the Caribbean, Central America, the Andes, the Southern Cone, and Spain, while remaining mutually connected by a shared linguistic core. The country with the largest population of native Spanish speakers today is Mexico. This fact is important because it shifts the center of gravity away from Spain. Although Spanish originated in Europe, most native speakers now live in the Americas. Mexico's size, media industries, migration patterns, and cultural influence make Mexican Spanish especially visible across the world. But Spanish is much larger than any single country. It is the official language of 21 countries, giving it a strong presence across national governments, schools, courts, and public life. Official status matters because it gives a language continuity across generations. It is taught, recorded, broadcast, and used in institutions. Spanish became global not only because people spoke it at home, but because states and societies built it into their public systems. Spanish also holds a major place in international diplomacy. It is one of the 6 official languages of the United Nations, alongside Arabic, Chinese, English, French, and Russian. That status reflects both the number of speakers and the number of countries where Spanish has official importance. Spanish is also used by many international and regional organizations, including the European Union, the Organization of American States, the Organization of Ibero-American States, the African Union, and organizations connecting Latin American and Caribbean countries. In diplomacy, language is not just communication, it is representation. When a language is official in major institutions, documents can be produced in it, speeches can be delivered in it, and millions of people can access international affairs without switching to another language. In education, Spanish is one of the most widely taught foreign languages in the world, alongside English and French. There are practical reasons for this. Spanish connects learners to a large number of countries, a vast body of literature, growing economies, travel opportunities, and hundreds of millions of speakers. 4. Students in the United States, Europe, Brazil, and many other regions, Spanish can be both accessible and useful. Its writing system is relatively phonetic compared with English, meaning pronunciation often follows spelling in predictable ways. At the same time, becoming truly fluent still requires mastering verb forms, regional accents, idioms, and cultural context. Spanish is popular not because it is effortless, but because the rewards of learning it are unusually broad. Spanish has a strong presence in the humanities and social sciences because it is tied to many influential histories and cultures. It is a language of literature, philosophy, political thought, anthropology, history, film, music, and journalism. Studying Spanish opens access to medieval Iberian texts, Latin American independence movements, modern novels, revolutionary writing, migration studies, and contemporary debates across multiple continents. The language carries records of empire, resistance, religion, identity, and globalization. This makes it especially important for scholars who want to understand the Atlantic world, colonial history, indigenous and European contact, and modern Latin American societies. Spanish is not just a communication tool, it is an archive of human experience spread across regions with very different histories. Spanish is also a major digital language. It is the third most used language on the internet by number of users, after English and Chinese, and the second most used language by number of websites, after English. This online presence matters because the internet amplifies language power. A language with a large digital footprint becomes more useful for business, entertainment, education, news, and social networking. Spanish-speaking creators produce videos, podcasts, articles, courses, memes, and music for enormous audiences. The digital world also connects regional varieties more than ever before. A viewer in Argentina can follow a creator in Mexico, a student in Spain can read a Colombian newspaper, and communities across continents can interact instantly in the same language. The story of Spanish is the story of a regional spoken Latin variety that became a world language through history, institutions, migration, and culture. It began in the Iberian Peninsula, grew from Vulgar Latin, gained strength in Castile, expanded through writing and political power, and then crossed the ocean through colonialism. Today, it belongs not only to Spain, but to hundreds of millions of speakers across the Americas and beyond. Its influence is visible in international organizations, schools, literature, social media, and everyday conversation. Spanish is global because it has been carried by states, communities, families, artists, teachers, and migrants. And like every living language, it continues to change wherever its speakers take it next. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.